Hello humans, welcome back for this final video on modeling, at least before we begin our workflow. It's definitely not the end of all the stuff available in Maya. There's loads of other things like curves and lofting out of them and different deformers such as lattices. But we're going to focus on the basic stuff for now. Prepare to be sort of weirded out because unlike the sculpting tools, the polygon tools are a little bit more unintuitive in what they do, and a lot of them overlap in function. So let's begin by creating a polygon cube. And currently it's with 4x4x4 in terms of subdivisions. So we can start working on this thing. First, let's open up. Now, the three menus that we're going to work with without mesh display, we're not going to go into mesh display. We're going to go into mesh first and work on those and see what they're all about. And the first thing on the menu is booleans, and what do they do? See, for some reason, this thing I keep losing this thing. So it must be a bug in Maya, which I wouldn't be surprised. It's the industry standard after all. Anyway, let's create a sphere. There we go. Use the defaults. The last sphere we created was quite brutal in terms of everything it did. So what the boolean does essentially, right? If you select two objects, it'll give you depending on what you want, the overlapping intersection, the intersection on one of the objects, or it'll combine both of them and remove the intersection. What I'm talking about is, let's say in this case, we wanted to create a lamp. Well, a lamp is a strong word, but let's say I wanted to create something like that. Okay, as you can see inside the geometry right now, right? I can still see the what's left of my a cube. So in order to actually get rid of it, we can select both of them, and then through the booleans, we can say union. Well, I can select both of them first and then say union. And as you can see currently, I have an object that is combined together, right? There's nothing inside, that's empty. So essentially got rid of the excess material. Problem is that this creates a bunch of issues in the model. In other words, we have disturbed edge flow. These edges, they just stop in the middle of nothing. They're not connected. There's problems all over the place. So I find that most of the time, the amount of work it takes to fix this, this actually creates more problems, in my opinion, than it solves. Obviously, you could do the same, but like the difference out of it, so you could have something like a fishbowl. Now, this is a little bit more useful, I suppose, but still, the edge flow is kind of weird, depending on what you're going to do with this. If you decide to soften it, as you can see, there's issues here if we subdivide it, right? And that's because we have a disturbed edge flow. One other thing we could do, obviously, is just get the intersection out of this and just leave whatever's left over. So this is pretty self-explanatory in the way it works, okay? But let's take a difference out of it and leave it at that as it is right now and close this out. Right? Obviously, there's a different classification. It can go off the normals, but really there isn't any difference most of the time. Right. Our next item on the agenda is the combine. This essentially, well, it's very simple. You just get two objects, which they can be modified separately, and you combine them, like so. So now this is one object, all right. And the separate does the opposite thing. It just separates objects, into their own, into separate identities. Okay. Let me just leave that now. Forget about the torus. The conform, I really don't know what that does. I've never had to use it, and as far as I know, it essentially allows you to, well, conform a shape onto another shape. Though, like I said, I never had to use it. I don't know how to operate with this thing. The fill hole is quite interesting. I find it to be useful in very certain cases. The reason for that is if we go into face mode right now, and let's say we decide to, let's say we delete these. Come on, dude. What the hell? There we go. Let's say we decide to delete these faces here. We can fill the hole in this object just by saying, fill the hole. So this is going to fill the hole inside, basically seal the object we're working on. However, as you can see, it creates another problem. There's also a lack of edges. And you might think, well, all we got to do, select the face, right? We're going to smooth it. But no, that's not how it's going to work. Not only smoothing creates other issues with lighting, but it also doesn't give you the desired result of it. So that's not the best, not the ideal way to connect things together, at least when it comes to subdividing them. Now you could say, what if we smooth through the settings here? And yes, on a couple of levels you might be true, but no matter what you select here, you will always end up with a weird result. Okay, it's not going to be quite as simple as you might imagine, right? Not to mention that all these settings here are quite well, they're quite extensive, all right? And you can try and try with all these different setups, but in general, this operation is not really made for our current case. So smooth is usually best reserved for once you're done with your object, you want to smooth a particular thing. That's when you want to use it. Triangulate and quadrangulate, it's very simple. You can triangulate this thing. As you can see, it created some kind of edges, and now if you quadrangulate it, it should remove most of them, but the problem is quadrangulate works on a cutoff, so we'd have to go into this and maybe increase the angle to, like, I don't know, 90 maybe. And now if we quadrangulate, this should clean them out for us. Maybe not. Maybe need more. So let's do this again and do it, like, max it out. Quadrangulate. Still, you see there's issues. So quadrangulate is not that effective in itself. Obviously this is fixable by manual labor. But I really don't find this very useful. The mirror bit is pretty cool. Essentially, it lets you copy a particular object over an axis with a particular offset. So if we wanted to copy this, you could obviously just duplicate and copy it yourself, but the mirror allows you to essentially give it some kind of a direction. Like in our case, we're going to mirror across the x-axis, and so like this, and it's going to be 20 centimeters to the left or the right. So if you apply, it should create another object over here, and they have an identical, they basically have the same properties between each other. All right, so there's that. But like I said, the mirror sometimes actually creates problems because it doesn't work always properly. It depends on the history, what kind of inputs you have stacked upon your object. So you might decide to actually do something about it. You can merge borders, by the way, if you if you decide to actually mirror across the object. I think it's possible to mirror across the object. Let's just do that. In fact, mirror across the object, and we should be able to. They should have basically seam it together. It did not. Okay, it was supposed to merge border. You'll get used to it once you decide to use it, though, because I don't think I don't know anyone who had to use this. For some reason, I find it extremely pointless to have this option. But it's nice to have around and know if you need something mirrored to be exactly at the same distance, you could. And like I said, you could. Maybe there are some settings in there that could hook your objects together if they're overlapping, right? So maybe in our case, if we go and make this 0, we could perhaps mirror it over. Well, that didn't work. Maybe 5. Maybe 5. And now we apply it. I don't know, maybe just 1. We go and mirror by 1. Will that work? Even by 1, it doesn't really work. Maybe you could just hook it up together and it should seam it together. Yeah, well, at least that works. So it basically welds your objects together. Once you're done, you have one big object here, I think. Once you do something different to it, maybe you could have to combine them. At any rate, it's a pretty cool tool. You get to do some awesome stuff with it. However, I don't know how I'm supposed to set this thing. So after it's done, I'm not sure what's the next step. All right, maybe you get to combine the objects, and now you should have your own thing. No. No, this doesn't work the way I thought it would. Could smooth both of them, obviously, and now you should have, yeah. So for some, I don't know how to get out of the setting menu, but essentially it was keeping it on so that you move. Now the mirror is gone though, so this is our final object at this stage. As you can see, even our faces got mirrored here. So you might imagine that if you select both of these faces and you decide to smooth them, it will actually, well, currently we're on linear method, so we need to go and go to set exponential and smooth them, it still won't produce the desired result. Okay, so that's really not what you want. You could smooth and then reduce, like I said, but that gives other problems as well. So it's not really ideal when it comes to smoothing stuff. All right. I believe this is all we really need. The transfer and all of those, they're essentially clipboard actions where you just copy different attributes and paste them around between other objects. So if you mirrored something, it usually already has these copied over. Transfer vertex order, I have no idea what that does. As far as I remember, it was just you got to select 3 vertices and somehow it does some weird thing. No idea for what reason you use it. The cleanup is pretty useful because you get to clean things that, for example, are unavailable, like the n-gons. As you can see, faces with more than 4 sides, they can get deleted, or you can even remove the 4-sided faces. I believe it's going to clean up the whole thing. Obviously, you need to select the object, and the cleanup should allow you to get rid of all the 4 sides, so this will triangulate it. If you remove all concave faces, I believe this will remove all this at the top. Yeah, it will sort them out essentially, but like I think this also creates a bunch of problems. You basically want to stay clean as as a default. I find that faces with more than 4 sides be nice to actually tessellate them. All of these operations essentially create triangles. All right, so it's kind of weird. The remove geometry is pretty cool because you get rid of edges with 0 length or maybe some very small length, and you can say the same about faces with geometry and maps. But sometimes this creates more problems than it actually solves, like with many other tools. Anyway, these are the tools available in the mesh drop down here. Essentially, you could think of it this way: everything in the mesh area here are operations that are performed on have a wide range of performance. In other words, they work on the object as a whole. That's what they're designed to do. So we can close ahead. We can go ahead and close this and go into edit mesh. Now this is the meat of most of your operations, because these are essentially work on components most of the time. So these are not mesh operations, but mesh editing operations, such as merges and stuff like those. So let's go ahead and delete this bit here. Go to faces and just delete those. So you could say that you can add divisions to a particular set of faces. So we can grab these 4 faces, you can add divisions to them. Very simple. You can increase the division count if you want, but there's nothing really special about this this tool here, because it basically allows you to create different like quads of triangles. It basically gives you more geometry to work with on a particular set. Obviously you can select the whole object and add divisions to that as well. Unlike the smooth, it simply adds complexity, but it doesn't change the geometry. Right? If you notice here, this is how a smooth would operate, whereas in our case, we don't have that problem. Okay. The bevel is essentially a way to extend an edge. So let's say you want to bevel this edge loop here, right? And you can bevel it in and select some options such as how many segments do you want, like maybe we want 3 or 4, the width of the bevel, right? And maybe you want to have a little bit less depth, and you can apply, and as you can see, the bevel is changeable. By the way, notice how because of our broken edge flow, we actually don't get the desired result. That's because we actually, when we selected the edge loop, it didn't go all the way around, right? As you can see over here. So that's when problems arise. You need to have continuous lines across your object, because operations such as these will create errors that at some point in time will be very difficult to solve. Ideally, you want to bevel stuff that are things that are at the end of your how should I say it, at the edge of your object. So if we apply it here, you can see that it's rounding the object up. Yeah, you can see here it's rounding the object up. Obviously, you can increase the depth in our case. They should be able to be increasable, but you can call it 1 if you want. There's our depth here, and you can increase the segments and the fractions. Can keep the fraction at 1. So all these settings here are basically the chamfers and the miltering. They basically provide you with more control over the operation. I can have increase the smoothing angle, for example. It's not a bad, definitely not a bad function, and it has many uses and many applications. The bridge tool is what you probably be using when you want to bridge a couple of edges. So in our case, we're going to select these here edges. By the way, notice one more thing I forgot to mention. Over here at the edge, you can see it says delete edge and vertex, right? So what we need to look at here, if we go into vertex mode, we've got a bunch of vertices that we don't need. They're not used. So we're going to have to go and hunt them down individually. I believe there was a way to filter around through them and select the ones that, you know, they're not connected to anything and delete them. But what you want to do next time you're deleting an edge is usually go with control and delete, because if you control and delete an edge, control and delete. Okay, maybe I should show it here. There we go. We have a face, you have a vertex here, and if we go and delete this edge, the vertex is going to stay. So what you want to do is delete with control delete, and now the vertex is gone. So whenever you're deleting edges, make sure to do it with control delete if you want to get rid of all the vertices. Obviously, the vertices will be gone if you delete an edge, and in our case, if we delete an edge, this would actually delete a lot of the you know, geometry here. But this would be a prime example of an angon. If you take a look here, it's actually got 5 points. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this would have to be cleaned up if you decide to, you know, do something with this piece of geometry here. Because like I said, if you take a look, the smoothing doesn't look nearly as good on something that has proper edge flow. Right? What else do we have here? The bridge. Yeah, I was going to show about the bridge. So we take the edges, let's say the two edges that we want, and we can bridge them together, and this is going to create a flat line. The difference between the fill hole and the bridge is you can actually add divisions. So in our case, we could add 3 divisions, which will not align with our original setup because this object is actually not a cube. So you could maybe add a little bit of taper. Wait, I don't know what that does. I thought it actually added, moved things. Maybe that's an offset that you need. Let's see if there's an offset here. Well, there is no offset. Well, that's very unfortunate. The twist is, I never really found it useful because I don't know what it does. It's supposed to be twisting the geometry around itself, but I never managed to get it to work. You can change the direction, obviously, and then, oh, the bridge offset maybe? No? No. Okay, well, that's unfortunate. So whatever is supposed to happen didn't happen. But at least it lets you create your own bridges, and you know, allows you to gives you something to work with. So in our case, we would need to create something like that, and there we go. We finally have an edge loop that can be selected. Well, an edge loop is strong because we don't really have any edge loops, but at least they align, right? Our next item on the agenda is the collapse bit. So let's go and select all these faces, for example, and we could collapse them to a single point, which would, you know, have an undesired result in my opinion. But this basically collapses faces. All right, you can collapse them together. I think you can collapse edges as well if you decide to select these and collapse them. Yeah, you can collapse edges. Though, like, I'm not entirely sure why would you want to do that, because most of the time this just creates problems. At least I haven't actually seen it. Maybe I don't know how to operate and use this thing, but I've never actually seen it to be used. I never managed to use it myself on a you know, more particular level. So we collapse these together, nothing's going to happen. Maybe we can collapse these two vertices. No. Well, if you take a look at this edge, for example, if we collapse it, it should connect these two edges here. So if we collapse it now, oh, it connects the opposite ones. Right, so it collapses, connects to, all right, I get it. I never actually understood why would you use it. But maybe there are some cases when you want to get rid of something, you can collapse stuff as long as you know how it works. So in our case, maybe if this would collapse it properly, yeah. This would actually be a problem because there's nothing to hold it back together. So this would essentially be an easy way to get rid of edges that you don't need. But it would never work on a big scale. You wouldn't be solving like all of your problems with going like one edge loop and just collapse that and, you know, creating such an issue here. In our case, there's nothing to collapse to here. Maybe we could collapse these two, but the result would be questionable. So as long as you keep collapsing, you're going to be getting more and more problems if you have a bad edge flow. Edge flow. Okay, the next one is connect, which I believe connects two faces. It's like collapse, but it just adds edges. So if we were to get these faces here, and connect would basically drive an edge ring around these. So just click connect, and there we go. We basically separated the edges. So in our case, if we went up ahead and deleted this, delete all of these, delete all of these, thank you, and then we go ahead and fill the hole, right? Fill the hole, where to go? Now we could technically use the connect button to connect different faces. So if we had one split here, one division, but remember the divisions don't work the same way. We need to add an edge here. So I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just trying to show you that the connect has its own uses whenever you try to connect two faces across the surface. In our case, we could connect all of these